fantasy friends, I'm Carrie Oehm from HotRoster today, and Week 15 is upon us, meaning it's time for the Final Four of the fantasy playoffs. But much like the Final Four in March, anything can happen, and that's why it's important that you do your homework in order to advance your fantasy championship game. I'm here to help with my starters and sits for Week 15 at the wide receiver position. Is it just me, or is the Redskins' Deshaun Jackson becoming one of those players who hits his stride at the end of the year? Last season, all 4 of Jackson's touchdowns came in the last 6 games, and he averaged just over 11 fantasy points in that span. This year, Jackson has caught 3 scores over his last 4 weeks, and has 51 fantasy points, the 5th most by any wide receiver during that span. This Monday night, Washington is home to Carolina. The Panthers haven't been great against the pass this season, especially on the road. In their 6 games away, the Panthers have allowed 7 different receivers to score or gain 100 yards receiving. I know some people are worried about the possible matchup between Jackson and James Bradbury, but I'm not. Jackson just finished roasting Patrick Peterson in Week 14, so roll against Deshaun in your lineups and make sure you pick him on HotRoster. Well, while Cousins and Deshaun have been reestablishing their long-lost connection in Washington, a new one has been forming in the Mile High City. Trevor Siemian seems to have found a new BFF, and his name is Emmanuel Sanders. Over the past 2 games together, Sanders has 38 fantasy points and 22 catches. This week, Sanders is home to the Patriots in an all-important game for the defending Super Bowl champs. The Broncos need a win if they want to make the playoffs, and Sanders also has a great history against the Pats as well. He's recorded at least 98 yards receiving or a touchdown in 4 of his last 5 regular season meetings, and the Pats have given up a score or 100 yards receiving to 6 different receivers on the road. All this should add up to big things for Sanders, and that's why I'm picking him this week. Another player who's found his PB to his J is Dontrell Inman of the Chargers. He's scored in 3 consecutive games, and he's also caught at least 5 passes in 4 of his last 5. And he's seen a minimum of 7 targets in 3 of those. This week, with Melvin Gordon out, I wouldn't be surprised if the Chargers moved away from the running game and focus on throwing the pigskin. And Inman's likely the guy to benefit, as Terrell Williams and Travis Benjamin are injured. The Chargers are home to the Raiders team that has allowed 6 touchdowns in their last 6 games, so I think you need to start this guy and pick him up on HotRoster. Alright, well, sticking with today's theme, New York Jets quarterback Bryce Petty and Brandon Marshall just don't seem to be on the same page, and since Petty has taken over, he's found a new, surprising BFF in Robbie Anderson. Anderson has seen 22 targets, with Bryce leading the way, catching 10 of those targets for 160 yards and a score. Meanwhile, Marshall has only caught 7 of 13 for 76 yards. But Marshall has been trending in the wrong direction for quite some time. Over his past 8 contests, Marshall only has 1 score and has only recorded 10 fantasy points or more only once. And that includes a Week 9 visit to Miami, where he was held to 5 catches for 46 yards. And now the Jets are home to those same Dolphins this week, and that's why for me it's a no-brainer. Make sure you keep Marshall on the pine this week. Okay, so speaking of guys who've been struggling, the struggle has been so real for Kelvin Benjamin of the Panthers. I mean, I'm well aware. He's on my fantasy team, and it's brutal. The 3rd-year player was hoping to bounce back after suffering an ACL tear last season. Problem is, they seem to have rushed him back in the summer. Benjamin has only 2 scores since September. He's also averaged 2 catches for 34 yards over the last 4 weeks, and he's combined for a whopping 2 fantasy points in his last 2 outings. That is so bad. This week, he faces Washington, who have only allowed 3 receivers to score double-digit fantasy points since Week 5, and I just can't see Benjamin doing that, so definitely sit him on HotRoster. Okay, so Kelvin Benjamin might have gone away from this theme, but Terrell Pryor of the Browns and his new quarterback, RG3, also seem to be on a different page as well. I know it's a small sample size, but in RG3's 2 starts this season, Pryor has been only targeted 9 times, and he's only managed 4 catches for 71 yards in those contests. Plus, Pryor's been struggling as of late. Last week against the Bengals, Pryor caught the 1 pass for 3 yards on 3 targets, and his last month, Pryor has only 1 game with 10 or more fantasy points. I think teams are beginning a game plan for Pryor, and defenses are focusing on shutting this guy down. Cleveland is in Buffalo, and my money's on Rex Ryan creating a game plan to stop Pryor. Make sure you sit this guy this week and bet against him on HotRoster. And that's it for today, fantasy friends. Make sure you join us tomorrow when we explore the HotRoster matchups for Week 15. And for those of you who don't know what HotRoster is, go to HotRoster.com, check it out, download the app, and give it a try. It's like no other fantasy game you've ever played. And then for some help winning the game, check out HotRoster today with the Raging Redhead Cam Stewart and Gary Thorne every weekday at 4:30 Eastern only on the Fantasy Sports Network. For HotRoster Now, I'm Carrie Oehm.